So my name is Agnieszka Gronwald. I graduated from Aberdeen in 2017 in economics and legal studies, and I have become a solicitor. I'm qualified in England and Wales now, and also as recently in Ireland
Hmm.
um, as a solicitor. And I have gone through quite a few different law firms over past 6 years or so. And now I'm with a law firm called Covington and Burling, which is a an American law firm, but I am actually based in Dubai, in their global white collar defense and investigations team.
Yeah, interesting.
And I
Thank
think
you.
that's yeah.
And why did you choose University of Aberdeen?
So Aberdeen actually, so for me originally, I simply wanted to study in Scotland. A lot of my family is either in Scotland or Scottish.
Yeah.
So it was always kind of a place that I had in mind. Scotland at that time is no longer the case, but as a European back then, I didn't have to pay tuition fees. So Scotland
Yeah.
was a very easy choice in that sense. And Aberdeen, um, it I essentially was recommended at university by a friend.
Yeah.
So it was one of the places that I applied to, and it had exactly the type of course combination that I was looking for. So I was going to look to study economics, and then I thought law would be a good sort of complementary degree to have. And Aberdeen had that combination. Not every university has it, so that's kind of how I landed there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was an interesting development in that sense that although I initially decided to study economics because I was good in math,
Yeah.
it turned out to be not a thing I enjoyed at all. So in the period that I was in Aberdeen, I actually realized that I'm really good in law and I really enjoyed that field a lot more. And here I am many years later.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And what were some of your favorite memories from Aberdeen?
So for honestly, I really liked sort of the campus community feel
Yeah.
that we have there. So in first year, I stayed in Johnston. I'm not sure if I've been to Aberdeen just a couple of months ago when I got married there.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and
Congratulations.
yeah, yeah. No, because my husband and I, we met in Aberdeen.
Oh,
So we thought it
interesting.
was a good idea to go back and get married there.
Mhm.
So I saw that it was being reconstructed. So the halls that I used to live in, they were not really accessible to anybody anymore, but maybe now they are in a better condition. So it was kind of a very closely knit group of people, and I'm really still in touch with the friends that I've made at that time. Just because we had to spend so much time together, and it was so easy to like not even make plans, but just essentially go out, and your friends were there, which I really, really appreciated because I had always lived in larger cities,
Mhm.
and where you needed to sort of make a proper schedule for
Mhm.
your activities and friends and everything. In Aberdeen, that was not necessary. And also, one thing that I really liked about living there is that it kind of simplified your life in a way,
Yeah.
where you didn't like, I could really focus on uni activities, on, excursions in the area, which is lovely. Um, and I didn't like the input that you get from sort of from the world was not as big as it is now in the different cities where I've lived since. So that was really sort of a calming atmosphere that I really appreciated.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And how did your undergraduate degree in university in Scotland differ from your master's degree in other country?
Um, so I did my master's in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
I relocated to the Netherlands essentially. There were many reasons. Part of the reason was that my husband, my now husband, then boyfriend, um, was offered a job there, and we just made a decision that the Netherlands has a good, will have good law programs, and I can find one that suits me, and then we can stay there together. And then um, It's honestly the biggest difference between Scottish universities and European universities. And that's also, I spent some time in Geneva while I was still studying in Aberdeen. So I went on an exchange for a year.
Yeah.
And that's true also for Geneva, that in Scotland, you have to really do a lot of heavy lifting yourself. Like a lot of research, like if you want to do well, you really have to put in a lot of your own work. It won't be that you will just study the material they taught you in class, read the manual or the book or whatever, and that will be enough for an A. In here, we really needed to do, especially in law school, you needed to do quite a lot of your own research. The work and the type of assignments that we got were a lot more analytical than, for example, what I was expected to deliver later in my master's. I actually found my master's program really easy in comparison
Interesting.
because I was used to producing essays where I had to lay out my argument, and it wasn't just like a set of questions where I had to memorize the answer and just lay it out for the professor to check. But it was actually in Aberdeen, it was always required that we, take a position, defend our position,
Yeah.
analyze the problem. And that I find that was actually one of the things that I learned there that were probably the most valuable. Because I don't know if you also have this experience, but in Eastern European, I grew up in Poland. In
Mhm.
Eastern European educational systems, we are really good and trained to sort of memorize knowledge
Yes, yes,
and use, like, we really are taught well.
yeah,
But the analytical element of education and being able to produce your own sort of, take the problem, distance sample it,
yeah,
analyze the issue, prepare the solution, and these kind of issues. That just wasn't a big element of my education earlier on.
mhm,
So that was something that, frankly, in Aberdeen, I found to be really well done. At
mm,
least in the courses that I followed, I frankly really appreciated it because this is essentially what I need for my job right now.
yeah,
So these are the basic skills that really that really kind of accompany me still.
yeah. Thank you. And did you participate in any clubs or societies as a student?
Yeah. So I was in the dance society.
Mm-hmm.
I did Argentine tango there. Even I think we did a little bit of a substitute. I mean, we served as a substitute teachers for a bit with my husband in that society. I also spent 2 years, I believe, in um, the Lawyers Without Borders.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm one of the mentors in the mentoring scheme at the university, and I usually get law students to mentor, and I always recommend them that specific society. I don't know how it works now,
Mm,
but when I was at the university, they really had a lot of activities, but not strictly speaking social activities, although that was also the case, but activities that would help you actually develop legal skills. So things like research projects.
yeah.
So that I spent 2 years with. I was also the one of the editors in chief of the managing editors in the Elphinstone Review. So the one of the I think we at that point we were just starting out, so I think we had maybe one or two journals a year. I don't know if this is still ongoing. I wasn't paying attention, but I did this. I was editing for a year, and then I was managing a small team of editors for another couple of months right before I graduated. And it was a really good experience, also because of writing. And I mean, to be fair, being part of the journal is always very cool.
Yeah.
So even if it is just working on a couple of articles a year to be published like once a year in an issue, so that I thought it was a really nice experience. I think these were the biggest ones. I mean, I've obviously like visited many other societies and I really enjoyed it, but it was more on the social side of things rather than actually like putting in substantive work. because this is where my time go. One additional thing that I did, which I don't think is a society, but I do recommend it to all the law students when I mentor them, is I participated and I coached the moot court, which is, you may not know this, it's a type of competition for lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is still probably the most important experience I've ever had throughout uni in terms of personal development and skills growth, and like especially ability to work with a team under pressure in these kind of circumstances. Essentially, everything that I do today in my job, I learned there.
Yeah.
So that's another activity that I was quite involved in.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's very interesting. Thank you. And what is Covington and Burling LLP? And what do they focus on?
So Covington is it's one of the most renowned American law firms.
Yeah.
They are very old, and like if you look into the Financial Times, they will come up next to some like serious problems. So it's a very interesting and very cool law firm to work for. They do all kinds of things, obviously, like they're a full service law firm, but specifically what I do with them is I do white collar defense and investigations. And what that is effectively we help clients sort of navigate their legal problems if they happen to have an issue with some regulator or a public prosecutor is investigating them. We advise them on these kind of issues. That also means that we also help them quite a lot avoid these problems in the first place. So, for example, I advise a lot on things like anti-bribery and corruption compliance, things like how to avoid accidentally being tangled up in a money laundering scheme, how to now here in the region, so in the UAE where I'm based now, there is a lot of work that goes into how to comply with sanctions, how to comply with anti-terrorism laws. So these kind of fields, I spent quite a lot on. In the past, I also spent quite a lot of time advising on competition law investigations. So I do all kinds of things, but primarily advising on compliance, and also doing internal investigations for clients when they're trying to figure out how to well, essentially resolve the issues that from time to time some companies may have.
Yeah, very interesting. And how does typical day for you looks like in the company?
It's the one thing that is particularly it's in common knowledge in legal circles,
Mhm.
but our days are really long. So especially now that, yeah, so we work really long hours. Especially now that I'm based in Dubai, our headquarters is in Washington, D.C.,
Mhm.
which means that pretty much all of my colleagues that I work with on daily basis wake up 8 hours after me. So I do have, unfortunately, occasionally late night calls, and I think it's only gonna get more and more now that, like I mentioned to you in our email correspondence, that next week we are actually staying with the time that there is, but everybody else is going to shift to the winter time, so it's going to be a 9 hours time difference between me and my colleagues as of next week. So, but essentially, there isn't really, I guess, like a typical day. If I described it, would sound really boring because it's just you go to the office and you open your email and you try to resolve the issues that come over there.
Yeah.
And then you have a bunch of meetings and a bunch of late night calls. Like what I really like about this job actually is the content and the people.
Mhm.
Because the one thing that Covington, I mean, my previous law firm that I recently left because unfortunately I needed to move to the UAE, and Covington offered me that opportunity. It was also very much like that. It's a very nice and work environment in terms of collaboration and teamwork because you see I know that many lawyers may not have the same experience, but I've been very lucky over these years to actually work in places where we had a very large, extremely complex project here and there, or advisory work was something that no one's ever seen before, like really complex, challenging problems. And there isn't really ever any single person that can come up with a solution on their own, because it's simply too complex. It's in many cases, certain things that we've handled for clients have never happened before to anybody. So sometimes these kind of situations also are. So you're kind of navigating a situation where you don't really know what the correct answer is, and you're trying to do your best. But that also means that if you are with a large group of other people who, all have different areas of expertise and all have their own points of view to contribute, that actually makes the whole thing possible. And individually would just not, like, even workload alone would never be possible for one person. Because, for instance, I used to work on cases that ran for years and had millions of documents and, God knows how many submissions or many, many different workflows. And everyone kind of chips in their little bit. And then you build something really, really big all together. And that's actually really satisfying in this work. So that, of course, means that you have to accommodate all kinds of different personalities and views and cultures. We have lawyers from all over the place. Like, I am obviously a Polish person, but I'm an English lawyer. And then I have work with all kinds of, American lawyers, lawyers from all kinds of European countries, but from many, many other places as well. And that is very, very interesting on a day-to-day basis. And so there isn't really a strictly speaking a routine every day, but you just kind of try to progress the project. And that by project, I mean a case. So it could be an internal investigation or a larger or smaller advisory assignment, or I don't know, a case filing in a dispute. So it really depends.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. And how would you recommend, what do you recommend to do to students studying law who apply for internships, for example? How do they stand out?
Honestly, that's a very difficult one. And I, with my mentees, whenever we work through it, it's a question that, like, I don't think there is anyone that has a good answer to it. Because for all other kinds of industries, maybe, the usual suspects are the ones, you do your internships, you are engaged in the societies, you network, everything. And this is all true for law as well. But it just so happens that, especially in the UK, law is an exceptionally competitive field. Like, I stand by the position that I would have never made it to the law firm I work in now if I stayed in the UK. Because maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is it's more likely than not, because I think maybe, I don't know if I would have a patience for the crazy, grueling recruitment system that they have. Not, now when I was recruiting, I had to go for like 10 interviews. So, and I still thought that this was nothing compared to some of the things that the entry level associates go. But I think the most important advice there is to really just be persistent, but also to know when to stop. Because I know many people who, try to be not even lawyers, but many that I know try to break into a specific area of law. For example, arbitration is an extremely competitive field. And I've worked in arbitration for many years. It's great. It's very interesting. But for example, it's not, we all get paid the same. You can get paid the same doing transactional work. You can get paid the same doing, I don't know, investigations law work, or law, some other area of law, more or less, of course.
Yeah.
It's still, but honestly, resilience and persistence is, I think, the most important if you want to start working law. And what's important also is that, there are many ways in which you can get into that profession.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I did not go through the traditional English law training contract that almost every single other lawyer under the sun has gone through. I've done my training in the Netherlands, where the recruitment process looked different, where the skill set that I had and the experience I had, they were valued there. Maybe they would have been valued in the UK as well. I don't know. I've not tried. And then I ended up changing law firms already as a lateral hire. So that's that. But honestly, for law, frequently, in order to even break in, you have to have an outstanding profile in the first place. So excellent grades. Seek out mentors. There are many programs, especially for law. There are many mentoring programs. So, you may have one, but to be fair, if you are part of many of these programs, that's already great. And to be honest, in my case, networking has been very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Because very often what you see is that part of why I've tried to apply for different roles in different law firms in many different ways. The fastest one is if they already want you. So if they either had already worked with you elsewhere, which happened to me once, for example, in my previous law firm, the boss, the partner who hired me,
Yeah.
he knew me from the law firm before, where I was a student, and then I was an associate. So he knew that at least he's not taking a risk on someone because he already knew how I work. For example, here in Dubai, I was introduced to my current law firm by a common colleague who didn't recommend me. She just said, like, I have a person, she is, interested in relocating to the region and looking into this, and they expressed their interest because they looked at my profile and they just saw a match. So, but that sounds like, oh, I met this person, but actually, if you looked at the amount of work and networking and reaching out to different people that kind of brought me to that point, it was, one person out of like 50 coffees and lunches.
Yeah.
And, but to be fair, like if you think about it, it's like I also think like what you're doing with us here, reaching out to us, collecting our experience, our advice, our comments, that's actually a very, very good idea. It's a very valuable sort of networking tactic as well, because what I find is that many people are kind of open to sharing their experience, and they are more than happy to give you advice. They sometimes may not be able to, help you or to share your profile with anybody, but at the very least, they can share their experience. And 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 may actually be able to do that. And that happened to me multiple times in my life. So, going through the traditional channels, sending your application, which is outstanding and perfectly written and whatnot, with all your university activities that emphasize your skills and your experience and your interest, sure, but also reaching out to people that already do what you want,
Yeah.
right? Even if it is just for coffee, so that they can tell you what you need to be putting in your application.
Yeah.
I had a mentee a couple of years ago, and he was interested. I can't remember what was it, some maybe private client kind of law.
Mhm.
I know nothing about it, honestly, nothing. But in these kind of cases, usually my advice is to, look around in your network. I can look in my network, you look in your network, you will look to your parents, friends, God knows what, and kind of, be a little bit shameless. Like the worst case scenario, they'll decline your request to have a coffee with them. That's
Yeah.
honestly the worst case scenario. You can always ask for help or advice or kind of sharing their experience.
Yeah.
And in most cases, like 80 to 90% of cases, people have no problem dedicating, 30 minutes of their time to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's
So
very
there is nothing to lose.
interesting. And what books or resources you would recommend for law students that you found particularly beneficial?
Oof, that one, I don't know. This one is a tricky one because I I don't read a lot of law books anymore. The only resource that I can recommend for law students that want to become English lawyers and are about to sit their SQE, which is the qualification exam in England, is there is a publisher called Law Answered. They have these books, which essentially are charts and notes that summarize everything you need to know for the exam. So for law, they also do it for all kinds of other subjects. They mostly specialize in English law, so I'm not sure to what extent they have Scottish content. But for English, especially for qualifying under the English system, this one is priceless. Because all the other vendors that I've experienced with, they give you too much text. That's all. Because the reality is that as, you know, other than that, as on a personal level, I don't read that much things about law in my private life. Because first of all, I spend 12 hours a day reading all kinds of documents or drafting documents. And then afterwards, I'm simply too tired. So, yeah.
Two more questions. And
Sure.
what is your advice for students who are almost finished with their degrees, yes, but they have no idea which area of law to focus on? Like, what do they do in this situation?
Honestly, it doesn't matter. You may always change. The most important, like, it's good to have something that is interesting to you. But for example, when I studied, I was interested in like economic law, competition, these kind of things, and I ended up doing some work in that. I had never once touched white collar or compliance, not once. I ended up doing that in the first place by a complete accident because the law firm where I applied, they just simply hired too many people for arbitration at that point. And they thought like, oh yeah, but you're still a good candidate. Would you like to do that instead? And I thought like, sure, it's also a good experience. It gets your foot in the door.
Yes.
That's the most important. But after that, they, a year later didn't have any more white collar work. So they put me back to arbitration and I did arbitration for a while. And then when I was switching firms, I thought I have a lot of experience which is transferable. And in law, what you see is that very often it is like the skill set is transferable between these different practice areas. And even though I've now been doing the white collar work for a lot longer, I'm still sort of coming here, and it turns out that instead of competition work, which I used to do when I was in Europe, because that was the big thing feeding the investigations there, for example, and anti-bribery and corruption work. Here it's more sanctions, for example, money laundering. Still anti-bribery and corruption is also a big component. So now I have to learn new area. I have some knowledge of it, but there's still a lot that I need to learn. And luckily, there are many more senior lawyers in the firm that can teach me. And that's kind of how it will be. So the idea is, some lawyers, they get into one area of law and then carry on and then spend the rest of their lives doing that. But it's actually less and less common because the problems that you are faced with, they don't relate to one area. So what I would say is kind of pick a broader field.
Yeah.
But then just take whatever opportunity comes your way that sounds best. And because if it is, especially in a competitive field like law, you might not have a lot of you might not have 5 law firms to choose from. You may have one. That's the one you'll go for. You'll qualify. You'll do your 4 rotations or 3 rotations depending on law firm, or you will do your specific training that you are offered, and afterwards you can try and kind of get into the area that you're interested in. You'll get into something close, or you will get into the one that you like. It may always happen that you will realize that the reality of the job is not what you thought and you don't actually enjoy it. I'll give one short example. I thought financial law sounded great.
Yeah.
Turns out things like transactional corporate finance and M&A really are not my thing. I've done it for 6 months. I really suffered. I'm never gonna do it again because it's a waste of everybody's time and everybody, it is what it is, unfortunately. I just didn't enjoy the dynamic. it's a very different dynamic in investigations or when you do litigation or arbitration. It's very fact heavy, and I realized that this is what I like. So it's really all about, I think, how like the day-to-day work that you'll be expected to do in a certain area of law. So for instance, if you really are a people's person, then maybe you would want to work with in a practice where people actually come and ask you for advice. I don't have to do it so frequently. I do it on a phone call with a client a couple of times a week, but it's not something that I have to do all day long. But
Yeah.
some people really love it, and they would really not be satisfied with with their work if they didn't have that. So I think it's more about what you're good at versus what the work requires.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. And the last question is, if what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think to care less about like, just achieving my goals
Mm,
in because you set yourself a certain goal. This is what you want. You're going to work very hard to get it because things frequently do not work out exactly the way you planned. Almost never, in fact. The idea is to kind of go in the specific direction. And the idea is not to be disappointed with yourself
yeah.
if you have smaller or bigger failures in life. Because I am really bad at failing, but I think it's a skill that we all need to practice quite a lot. Because just being able to pick yourself up after a failure and, um, carry on or come up with an alternative plan, or, if not through the door, then through the window.
Yeah.
There is always some way to get you to more or less where you want to be, even if like I was never expecting to end up in the UAE,
Hmm.
but the life has gone in a way that it did, and at the time when we were making the decision, this ended up being the best decision for us at the time. And so, but all these different failures and the moments where you will pick yourself up and try again or try something else, it will bring you to the place where you are actually like successful, as long as you do not give up and you're not too hard on yourself.